Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 best horror movies of all time list. My name is Clay, and with me, as always, is Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm good, other than the mouse bite.
The mouse bite?
It's a reference, Clay.
Oh, I know we both have colds.
Yes,
And,
yes,
you know,
we do.
you've got some shoulder issues going on. I thought there was just another thing you were saving for the show.
Yeah, I'm just ambushing you with my legitimate health concerns on air.
I wouldn't want it any other way. Thanks for
It's the
saving
only way
it.
we talk to one another.
Yeah, thank you for saving it for so we could actually get something out of it instead of me just having to listen to you, you know.
Content.
Today we are doing a pretty heavy hitter as far as our list is concerned. We're doing Rosemary's Baby, which is number 27 on our list. It has a 96% Rotten Tomato score with an 87% audience score. I was curious what the negative audience opinions of this movie were, and so I pulled up some Rotten Tomatoes reviews I want to read, but I'll do that later after at the end.
I cannot wait to hear those because I don't even know what they could say.
They're pretty good. It really, I found them interesting because it kind of it shows you how subjective horror is and what is scary, and they are reviews from both of them are from 2022, so it definitely feels like someone whose experience with horror movies is a lot more modern and has a lot more modern sensibilities. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Had you seen this one before?
Yes, I have, but not in a really long time. I was trying to think when we watched it the other night how long it's been, and I don't remember. I have like vague memories of sitting in my very old apartment, like immediately post college, like watching it on a laptop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that wasn't the first time I'd seen it, but I feel like that's probably the last time I watched it. What about you?
The best way to watch it on a laptop. Actually,
yeah.
I will say the one movie that I watched for the first time on my computer and that I thought actually it made the movie better was Cloverfield. I watched that on like my old Dell desktop on like the VLC player or something in a 6 by 16 by 9 little square. And
I thought you were going to say Host.
No, that one, yes. That was, I watched it on TV. I watched it on the TV. But, Cloverfield actually, I don't know. I think it added to the fact that it was supposed to be camcorder found footage kind of thing. Anyway, we'll talk about that if we ever get to Cloverfield. But, yes, I've seen this a number of times. This has been a favorite of mine for a long time. I can't remember the first time I watched it, but I do remember liking it pretty much right away. And I think the thing that's so interesting about this movie is you kind of get new stuff out of it every time you watch it. I feel like there's little details and stuff that you never notice until 2 or 3 times in. Like Charles Grodin's mustache. I don't know if I ever noticed that he had a mustache in the second half of the movie, which is apparently from the book, oddly enough. But
what an interesting detail to hold on to. I like that.
Yeah, apparently Polanski had never adapted a book before, and so when he adapted this, he skewed incredibly closely to the book, and I think the producer, William Castle, said he didn't realize he could take some liberties with it, and so he put stuff in there that's in the book that really doesn't have much bearing on anything, such as the fact that in the book, when she goes back to Dr. Hill, it says that he now has a thin blonde mustache that is hard to see.
I love that though because we can get into it. I don't want to go too far now.
Okay. I think then we are going to play the trailer for you, and then we will come back and talk about it.
7. Here you go. Originally, the smallest apartment was a 9. They've been broken up into 4, 5s, and 6s. This room, for instance, it would make a lovely nursery.
Oh, it's a wonderful apartment. I love it.
Let's have a baby.
Miss Woodhouse, congratulations.
Really? Congratulations.
Rennie Castevet has
as a barbarian. I'm gonna have her make a daily drink for you.
You're pregnant.
Are you aware that the Bradford had rather an unpleasant reputation around the turn of the century?
Awful things happen in every apartment house. She seems so happy and full of... She said wonderful things about you and your husband.
This is for you from Roman and me.
Sometimes I think they're too friendly and helpful. Guy, I have a pain. I'm so afraid the baby's gonna die.
Rosemary, pain like that is a warning that something isn't right.
They're not setting foot in this apartment ever again. What about what's fair to me?
There are plots against people, aren't there? Well, there's one against me and my baby.
If you say anything more about witches or witchcraft, we'll be forced to take you to a mental hospital.
I haven't slipped up that.
Cut, Chester.
He told the doctor to make sure that you got the room that was on his desk.
Read what they do, Guy. They use blood in their rituals. Monsters. You're lying! You're lying! You're lying! What have you done to it?
Okay, Rosemary's Baby from 1968. Directed by Roman Polanski, written by Ira Levin and Roman Polanski, starring Mia Farrow, John Cassavetes, Ruth Gordon, Sidney Blackmore, Morris Evans, Ralph Bellamy, and Grumpy Baby Charles Grodin. I always forget he's in this movie, and it's always so pleasant when he shows up, because he's like...
Grumpy Baby.
He's so young in this, and he is
so grumpy.
One of the preeminent actors who is just excellent at being annoyed. Like, not so much angry, just annoyed.
Yeah, a believable level of annoyed.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Like, I would like to see him and Miguel Ferrer in a movie where you have Miguel Ferrer, who is the preeminent asshole actor of our time, or was, and Charles Grodin, the preeminent guy who's annoyed by people actor, and just see who breaks first.
God, what a combo that would have been.
In a movie no one would want to see.
Except for me and you, apparently.
I guess, yes. Amanda, what happens in Rosemary's Baby?
A young wife comes to believe that her offspring is not of this world. Waifish Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband Guy move to a New York City apartment building with an ominous reputation and odd neighbors, Roman and Minnie Castevet. When Rosemary becomes pregnant, she becomes increasingly isolated, and the diabolical truth is revealed only after Rosemary gives birth.
That kind of gives away the whole movie there.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny.
Well, Clay, by this point, if you haven't seen it, it's your own fault if you're spoiled.
That's true. It is 50-something years old at this point.
Yes.
You know, it's funny. I remember the first time I watched this being very confused that the characters' names were Castevets because Guy, the actor who plays Guy, is John Cassavetes. And so I don't know why that just stuck in my head, but the whole time I'm like, wait a minute, but Castevet's the character, but Cassavetes is the actor? Maybe that's why that person really hated this movie in the reviews. I don't know.
Deep thoughts from teenage Clay.
I think I paid attention to most of the rest of the movie, but maybe I didn't. I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, in case you didn't, Clay, I can tell you some things you'll find in this movie.
Please do.
Some things you'll find in this movie include, quote, kind of fun in a necrophile sort of way.
Yeah, that...
Let's start off with a bang.
I know that things were different back then, and we're probably going to talk about that a couple times. But man, like, imagine...
I would like to think they're not that different.
No. I mean, it's such a wild excuse for... I mean, even if you don't count the demon part of it, he's having sex with his passed out wife. And then he says it was kind of fun in a necrophile way as a way to kind of like ease the tension of what he had done, which is suspect at best.
Yeah, I mean, yes. We will dive deep into all of that. You'll also find Roman Castevet spitting truth about the Pope.
Yeah, this must be Sinead O'Connor's favorite movie. Although that's it's a pretty dated reference. But
a real tear down of the Vatican.
Yeah, he really goes into it though with people he just met.
Well, I mean, when you were born and raised to be the leader of the Satanist cabal that's going to bring about the end times, I think that's kind of one of your main talking points.
That's true. And, another thing that it never really picked up on until I had been really focusing on it this time was how deep the Catholic runs in Rosemary especially. And so to go see these neighbors and then just have him start being like, the Pope's a piece of shit, and have her just be like, very interesting.
Well, Clay, that conveniently leads us to the next thing you'll find, which is Rosemary acting like everyone's mom the first time they heard about Harry Potter.
That part at the end, when she starts going off about witches, I was so conflicted because it's like, yeah, she's finally figured it out. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, she sounds like everybody's mom from 1987. And honestly, today.
Yes, kind of, where witchcraft is coming for your children, and it's 1989 again with the Satanic Panic.
Yes.
You'll also find Vidal Sassoon.
Yes. Yeah, it's very...
You gotta say it like that.
A lot of very upfront reference and time given to Vidal Sassoon. Which,
yes, and the haircut.
And the haircut, yeah. That's one of those names that I only knew from shampoo commercials. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I appreciated was an actual person / salon that people went to.
Right, because there is no Mr. Head and Shoulders out there.
Right. It's like for the first time I watched this, it was like she came back and said, "Do you like it? It's Garnier Fructus."
Yeah. Do you like it? It's Bath and Body Works.
It's a shampoo and a conditioner.
It's a 3-in-1. You'll also find drinking while pregnant.
Yeah. Along with drinking while pregnant.
Much.
They give her a giant glass of wine, and they also they throw a party later in the movie, and I was all I could think about as they threw a party for all their friends after everybody leaves. All I could think about was, man, I can't imagine having people over to my house who then leave and have you see that they've just dropped all their cigarette butts on your floor.
I definitely ruined some kitchenware at people's houses at parties in college.
That's college, though. These people are like in their mid-20s, like early 30s. And they're
That's true.
Dropping cigarettes. Was that just what people did? Is that how they handled it? I know that my parents had ashtrays at the house. I remember this one when I was very little. Neither of my parents smoked, but they had ashtrays at the house because their friends smoked. And so they would put them out when their friends came over, which is, it's just it's a different world. I think about it. I think about it a lot. How before like 1995, everything just smelled like stale cigarette smoke.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, can you imagine how bad that apartment smelled afterwards?
Oh God, for like multiple days.
You'll also find the United Mental Force.
I really like that name. And it's I'm surprised no one else has ever used that to try to rebrand from Witch's Coven, because that definitely sounds like the PR firm's rebranding of Witch's Coven if you're like trying to run for senator or something.
I mean, it sounds a little bit like what people in Heaven's Gate might have thought about themselves.
That's true. It does.
You know what I mean? Like a little culty. Like if Jonestown people were like, this is the people's church and we have a united mental force, I'd be like, yeah, sounds right for you.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
And last but not least, you'll find the evergreen questionable parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. On several aspects, I think.
Arguably the movie, the patron saint of questionable parenting is Rosemary's Baby.
I do want to talk about that more later.
Yeah. So yes, Rosemary's Baby. This is a very good movie.
Yes.
And it's good right away.
Mm-hmm.
I always love the opening sequence when they're being shown the apartment, because they do such a good job of very sort of discreetly showing you that something has happened there.
Yeah.
Whether it's finding that the big armoire had been pushed and there's scratches in the floor, or the other little bits and pieces. Whoever had lived there previously clearly knew something and was probably taken out by the people who you meet later in the movie. But it's just right away they start setting things up and kind of building this level of tension and suspense, whether it's that or it's the way that random people just start looking at Rosemary. It's just right from the get-go. It's very good.
Yeah, I also love the setup in this movie, because like you're saying, it's so subtle and it's clear enough that you get the point of the big stuff that you're really going to need to know later, like the giant armoire blocking the closet and feeling like, okay, there's something going on with that closet. I'm going to keep my eye on that.
Yeah.
But then there are those smaller things like when they're touring the apartment, Rosemary sees on one of the desks handwriting that says, I can no longer associate myself.
Right.
And then the sentence ends. And I didn't realize before, but I realized it this time, that the way the woman who lived in the apartment dies is the same way that Hutch dies later in the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they talk about her going into a coma and then she never recovers. She's in a coma and then she dies.
Never noticed that before. Never caught that.
Yeah, and there's so many little things like that, and it starts feeding you those things right away. Like even the very next scene where Guy and in my head I'm just like Mia Farrow, Guy and Rosemary are having dinner with Hutch. They're having lamb and they're having wine. And that's very Catholic imagery.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So it's like all of that stuff. And you could do this throughout this whole movie. It's one of these movies that I love so much because you can read it like a book. You can pull apart the metaphors and follow. You could write a whole book about the color yellow in this movie.
Right. That's the thing in this movie that everybody always cues in on, right? It's like, have you noticed the color yellow is used because of the yellow wallpaper store? It's like, okay, but that's surface level shit. That's like the first level of stuff that you can pick up in this movie. The Catholic through line through everything, even that first dream that she has about the Catholic school bricking up the windows. I can't remember what she says about the dream when she wakes up, but it's not really connected to anything directly, except maybe, I'm not sure. Do you remember what she says? Is it something about somebody going out the window?
I don't remember. I remember there's a moment in the dream where she says, I told Sister Veronica about the windows and she withdrew the school from the competition.
Yeah, this time I couldn't totally track what that was supposed to be in reference to, but I thought maybe it was supposed to be tangentially related to the death of the girl who she meets in the basement, not causing or anything, but just similar kind of imagery of problems with a window, because they say, she must have thrown herself out a window. But there's it's this. You start off with this dream. The dreams are such a recurring motif, and to start it with dreams of Catholic school, and then start going into these other twisted things. It's there's just so much in this that you can piece apart.
Yeah, and I love the way that the dream sequences are always weaving in a little bit of what's actually happening in real life around Rosemary with her subconscious images. Because the nun dream, I always read that as she's falling asleep and her brain is conjuring up memories of her childhood. I think she says she was raised very Catholic which I'm assuming means she went to a school where the nuns were teachers and all of that. But she's hearing Minnie through the wall berating Roman because the girl they had taken in, who was attempt 1 at Satan's bastard child, has committed suicide. And she's yelling, but it's Minnie's voice, and it's a nun speaking. And I think that's so interesting because not only is Minnie kind of diametrically opposed to a Catholic nun, she is in a weird way a satanic nun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know, like you can kind of play all these like games with imagery and metaphor all the time in this movie, and I just think it's so well done. It's so eerie but believable. Like the dreams feel like dreams. They don't feel hokey or overdone. They kind of do, at least in my opinion, really mirror the way dreams work.
Yeah. Yeah, they do that thing that does happen in dreams that I don't really know if I've ever seen anyone really do anywhere else, which is exactly that thing where you're seeing you're having a dream, you're seeing dream imagery, but the things that people are saying are actual words that you're hearing in real life. I've always been so fascinated by that ever since I very clearly remember having a dream when I was much, much younger, and I used to listen to the radio when I would go to sleep. And I remember sort of being like 1/4 awake, that sort of like weird middle ground where you're still dreaming but you're not 100% asleep yet, or still not 100% asleep still. And I was having a dream, and the dialogue that people were talking in the dream was the things people were saying on the radio.
Oh.
And so it was, I always found it fascinating because like the processing time it would take in your brain to make whatever they're saying on the radio the dialogue of your dream just seems so wacky to me. Like when I saw Inception, I'm sorry, I'm going on a big tangent here. When I saw Inception and they started getting into that thing where it's like each level of dream time passes slower, I started thinking like, oh yeah, I mean, if your brain processes things in real time but feeds it to you slower, I don't know. I just started tripping out on my own dream logic, but that is to say, the dreams in this movie are very effective.
Yeah, and there's even it does that thing that I don't know. I'm sure this has happened to you in your dreams, but it's definitely happened to me a lot, which is somebody starts out as one person and turns into another person. And that happens a couple times in her dreams, and it's really subtle or like really well done. I'm thinking specifically of the period in one of her dreams where she's on deck of a boat, and the captain is this kind of young, handsome guy, and he puts his hat on, and the camera kind of turns, and when he lowers his arm, it's Roman. And it's like no attention is really brought to it other than like I actually had to kind of wind it back and watch it again a couple times to be like, wait, that was a younger guy first, though, right?
Right, yeah.
And then you see but it's not called out in a big. There's no music stinger. There's no like change in the lighting. It's just what happens in your dreams, where it's like you think you're talking to your downstairs neighbor, and then in your dream, all of a sudden, it's your sibling.
Yeah, yeah. It's part of a larger thing that's so well done in this movie of just. While things aren't necessarily out and out, capital S scary or capital T terrifying, it just keeps you so uneasy and starts preying on your nerves the same way it does for Rosemary. And you never know what's real. Even with the dream sequences, when you finally get to the end, most of the time the dream sequences, they do them in like first person perspective, right? It's a lot of like seeing things through Rosemary's eyes. And when you get to the final sequence, when she discovers the baby's still alive, they go back to the first person camera, and it has a very similar feeling to those dreams. And so it's kind of conditioned you for this sort of surrealist thing where they just add a little bit of sprinkle to that at the end, enough to keep you off balance as to what exactly you're seeing.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I don't think I had quite pinned that down so specifically when I watched it the other night.
And, this is a great movie for non-focal acting. Like, there's so much going on in scenes with multiple people. There's not a ton of close-ups in this movie. When there's multiple people in scenes, they usually kind of keep it pretty wide, because most of the time the other people in the scenes are acting just as much as the focus of the scene. So the one that I pulled out this time that I really loved is when Roman comes over, when Hutch has come to visit, and Hutch is talking to Rosemary, and it's kind of like a two-shot, and the focus is the two of them talking, but Roman is in the middle, and you can see him, and he's just like focused on Hutch in a very, like, it's such a subtle, trying to suss out what this guy's about, but he's also kind of pissed off that this guy's here. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, and there's tons of moments like that, which I think is one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about earlier, where you were talking about how Polanski included a bunch of things from the book that don't necessarily have any substantive impact on the story. Like, oh, the doctor has a mustache when she goes back to him 6 months later. But I think these two kinds of things work really well together in this movie, because it gives you more of a sense that this is really happening, because that's kind of how things are in real life. Like, people are not exactly the same if you don't see them for 6 months. You know, next time you see them, they might have changed their hair or whatever. And people in group moments, even when they're not the focus, they're not automatons. They don't just shut off. They're still active somehow. And it kind of reminds you that everybody has their own story going on parallel to what Rosemary's going through. And you could easily imagine scenes that are happening that we're not seeing between a lot of these other characters, or an entire parallel movie, you know, from somebody else's perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody else who surrounds Rosemary, they all have this energy that feels very much like people who are trying not to spoil a surprise party. And it all works really well, because they have that sort of nervous energy where they're trying to direct her in a certain way, but they're not trying to give away the game. And I think it becomes more apparent on rewatch when you know exactly what's going on. But it's such a unique thing, because, you know, even the way I think her husband is the worst at it, because he's always the one who's like way overcompensating and kind of like pushing it over the top to try to be like, oh yeah, you know, I was just in the area, decided to come home for lunch, you know, that kind of thing. It's so great, because you, the audience, are not, I mean, even if you do understand what's going on, you are not fully, you don't have all the information as to what or why is happening. And so it just is so uncomfortable and so uneasy to watch them really jostling her around the way that they do.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating to me, because I think depending on where she's at in her pregnancy, in sort of her attitude towards her husband and her neighbors, they treat her a little differently. When she's kind of been well behaved, they start to ignore her.
Right.
Like, they think she's complacent, she's gonna go along, we don't have to worry about it, and they sort of don't give a shit about her in those moments, which is so interesting. And I think I noticed it a lot more this time when I realized how closely together the New Year's Eve party and then the party they have with their friends, how close in the movie that is. And it really helps you draw a comparison, not just between the two different groups of people, but between the ways they treat Rosemary.
Yeah.
Because in that New Year's party, the attitude is very, we got her. We got it. That part's done. That's in the bag. we don't really give a shit about her. Like,
Right.
Minnie's handing out hats and sashes and stuff, and she doesn't even offer one to Rosemary. Like, she does not care.
Yeah, yeah.
Rosemary sat off to the side talking to her doctor about her pain, and her husband is, like, off gallivanting and chatting everybody up. Like, she is not the center of that party. But then when they have all these friends over who are all, you know, loud and mingling and socializing with one another, all of them are attentive to her. When she comes into a room, people are congratulating her. People are telling her things. People are involving her in interactions and conversation in a way that no one else around her in this building does. And I think that's really telling, because they care about Rosemary and like her for who she is, whereas Guy and the Castevets, and the rest of the Satanists don't care about Rosemary at all. She is just a vehicle for what they want.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about Rosemary as a character for a bit. She seems to be such a perfect vehicle for what they're trying to do, because she is so frustratingly accommodating to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, she without having a big monologue where she's like, I just want what everybody wants. The nice picket fence, the house in the suburbs, the like, you get that what she's not trying to make waves in her life. You know, even I think the way that she talks about her husband is really interesting, because she does it as though it's a memorized script. And it made me think this time, is this something that she has decided, or is this something that he has decided he wants to be referred as? Because when she says he's the star of Luther and Nobody Loves an Albatross and a lot of television commercials, like, it feels very put on. Like, it's like, this is the way I'm supposed to introduce and talk about my husband.
I bet you if Rosemary were real and this was a real relationship, that is not something that she consciously set out to do or something that he insisted she did overtly. I'm guessing it's because there have been other times where she's talked to people about his work and what he's done, and it has upset him.
Yeah. Maybe she screws it up or something.
Right. Or she either inflates it too much and he gets pissy because he's like, you know, you're giving people the wrong impression. I'm not actually that successful. Or the other way around, where it sounds like she's selling him short. And this is, I bet you, the sort of like workshopped in real time way that she's figured out how to talk about his career in a way that does not put him off one way or the other.
But at the same time, she's very proud of him, because when she's in the basement, the way that she does the leads with the impressive sounding thing first, where she says, "Oh, my husband's an actor," you know, and then leaves at that. And she's, "Oh, what is he? Have I seen him?" And then she's like, "Well, no," but it's very interesting, because like, she clearly loves her husband, and she clearly loves their marriage. And I think there is an element of that apartment being, it's so strange, because we were trying to figure it out last night as we were watching this. How much money do these people have? Because it's their apartment is so strange, because the apartment itself is impressive, but it's in like an older kind of rundown building, but all the rooms are very impressive. But like, the stuff that they have is a weird mix of expensive and cheap. And I couldn't tell if the cheapness was because they don't have that much money, or if it was because it was the style of the time. Specifically, the headboard of their bed is just like bricks and 2x4s or planks. And I couldn't tell if that was, oh, we just don't have the money for this piece of furniture, or if this is the choice, this is the style, they have the bricks and the wood.
So my theory is that when they first move in, they don't have that much money. Because one of Guy's big concerns about taking the apartment is that it's more expensive than the other one they looked at.
True, yeah.
And I think that a lot of what they have initially in the apartment, the sort of cheaper looking stuff, is there at first. And then I think once he's literally made the deal with the devil and starts getting better parts and more money, that's like, I think as it goes, they're adding those more expensive things to their lives once he's found success.
That tracks, yeah.
But I also, I really love, and it, I love it because it's so well done, and I hate it because it's so upsetting. The relationship between Rosemary and Guy, because I have been in a similar, not obviously not the same, but a similar relationship like that where you're really convinced, and you love somebody, and you're convinced they love you the same way, and you have to find out the hard way that they don't.
Right, yeah.
And that there are all of these little moments that we get to see condensed over the course of 9 or 10 months of the two of them talking to each other but not really communicating.
Right.
Lots of little like, no, never mind, it's fine, or oh, if it's gonna become a whole big thing, I'll just eat it, whatever. Or sure, yeah, no, we can do what you want, that's okay. And it's always this sort of placating instinct that I think she has. And I think a lot of that is about the time and her upbringing. I get the impression that she was probably raised pretty strongly religiously and therefore conservatively. She dresses like she's got short dresses, but they're all kind of girlish. Like she's never, even when she's naked, she's not sexy.
Sure, yeah.
So she comes off as just very, very young and very naive. But I want to emphasize, I think she's naive, but I don't think she's stupid.
Right, yeah.
But there's one moment where in the nightmare / rape scene, when she has the vision of the woman come to her while she's getting tied down to the altar, and the woman is saying like, oh, we will have to do this, and please tell us if the music bothers you and we'll make them stop. And Rosemary says, oh, no, please don't change the program on my account. And I think that one line kind of sums up her character throughout most of the movie, which is, I don't want to make waves, I don't want to upset anybody, I'm happy to just go along with the program until she thinks it's her baby that's in danger, not herself. Then is when she's willing to rebel.
Yeah, because if you look at what she does throughout the movie, when she talks about her pregnancy and when she talks about a lot of things, she's really only echoing things that other people have told her. She's not really forming her own opinions about a lot of stuff. So it's like, oh, yeah, they say it's normal to lose weight at the beginning, but I'll fill it, like that kind of thing. She definitely is not trying to make waves and not be suspect of anybody. And it is not until she, quote unquote, starts doing her own research, when she starts to figure out what is actually going on and develop some agency.
Yeah, and not only is she just echoing things other people have said to her, she's echoing things mostly men have said to her.
Right, yeah.
With the exception of Minnie, there are no women really around her. And
let's not forget Laura Louise.
Oh, God. Laura Louise, who like visibly hates her immediately. And I
love that character.
I love that character, too. It's so insane. It's great. But, Minnie is interesting, and I want to talk a little bit about Minnie in a minute. But I find it so fascinating and heartbreaking in this movie that there are all of these men, even Hutch, who's a well-meaning man, kind of telling her what to do and where to go and how to act and how she's feeling. There's a guy is telling her all the time, oh, you need this, and you're just being this way, and you're sulking and you're just tired, you need to rest. Like he rarely just lets her be herself. He's always kind of trying to direct her, just like the doctor is, just like Roman is. But there's this moment in the party with their friends where those three women see her kind of break down, and they hustle her into the kitchen, which is a stereotypically like feminine domestic sphere space, and they barricade the doors. They don't let any of the men in. And it's these three women who just listen to her, and they ask her questions instead of telling her how she should be or how she should feel. They ask her these open-ended questions and listen to her answers. And when they hear them, they're all unanimously kind of like, that's crazy. You should not have to feel this way. You shouldn't have to go through this. No one should expect you to deal with this alone the way you have been. You need help. You need someone else to help you get out of this. And I think it just shows that Rosemary has gone, so much of her life it seems like has been under one form of like capital P patriarchy. I don't just mean like oh men, I mean like the institution of religion. I'm assuming a house with a religious father, and then seems like she's gone straight into marriage and is very deferential towards her husband. He is the one with the career. He's the one who makes the decisions and says yes or no ultimately to pretty much everything. Like, he's the one who says okay to the apartment, and that means they move in. He's the one who says, okay, let's have a baby, and that means they try to get pregnant.
Right.
She has to kind of constantly wait for his permission. And yeah, it's just, it's done so subtly, and it reminds me a lot of our conversation about repulsion.
Yeah,
and how it's so fascinating to me that all of this has come from the mind of somebody like Roman Polanski.
Yeah, I'm really glad we watched Repulsion before we watched this, because I had never seen anything that he had done before this. I had seen Chinatown and a couple other things, but Repulsion, there's a lot of repulsion in this, as far as he's not like stealing from himself or anything, but it has the same kind of unease and distrust of people around you, and paranoia and turning in on yourself that that Repulsion does, and it works very well here.
Yeah, and the sort of making the home, like taking your home and perverting it, and taking it from a safe place of refuge and turning it into the site of your worst trauma. And it's really interesting. It subverts it and makes it so that the characters are paranoid at first, with or without reason, and then it just amps that way up by saying, like, you're not even safe at home in your own bed.
Right, yeah. What do you think of the fact that she's starting to push against the Castevets and even Guy and her doctor until the pain stops, and then once the pain stops in her stomach, she basically gets back in line? What do you make of that?
I think that's really understandable. Because especially with, her husband, she loves him. She's looking at him as somebody who loves her back and who cares about her. And so she wants to believe him. She wants to trust him and believe that he's right, because it's a lot more comforting, A, to think that he does care, but also to think that he knows best.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier. And I think that's one of the interesting things about this movie, is that kind of throughout the whole thing, Rosemary is looking for somebody else to be able to tell her, I know what's best and I'm right. And you can trust me and you can listen to me and you don't need to worry about these things. And I think it makes a lot of sense that once she feels better, she stays in line, because then everybody kind of also starts saying to her, like, see, look, you were being silly. It did go away and now you're fine. So there's obviously nothing to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it too. That she is, she's never been pregnant before. She doesn't know what the experience is going to be like, and I think it's playing on that element where, when I have also never been pregnant, but
Really?
not that I know of. But it's when you have anything that's wrong with you, right? Not that. The blight on the human existence that children are. When you have anything going on in your body that you're not used to and you don't know of, you're going to start catastrophizing things. That's why WebMD exists,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm sure she has a mind's eye understanding of what being pregnant is, but when it's not that, she starts to get worried. And then when the pain goes away and things start to go along smoothly, it's definitely I was just being silly. I was just, everybody around me is right. I have just been acting crazy.
Right, and all of these people who kind of present themselves as either experts or at least more worldly and knowledgeable than she is. She is, like we said, kind of traditional in her marriage, where she kind of wants to be able to defer to her husband. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, she wants to just trust him. And the Castevets have set her up with the best obstetrician in the city. So, of course, you want to trust him. Mm. And it's kind of funny because this morning I had to go into the doctor's office and get an arthrogram MRI on my shoulder.
Of course.
Which is
technology discovered by Arthur C. Graham.
Yes. Arthro C. Graham. What that means?
People have been saying it wrong. It's actually King Arthro.
King Arthro Graham. But it involves, you go in and they target the joint and they stick a big needle all the way into the joint.
Fun.
And they inject a numbing agent and then they inject a dye, and then you go into the little narrow claustrophobic tube of the MRI machine and you have to stay very, very still for 20 minutes. And I'm going through all of this and all I know is that my shoulder has been giving me pain for like a year and a half, 2 years, whatever. And all I know is I want it to go away. And these people around me are telling me these are the things I have to do so that they can tell me what exactly is wrong and figure out what to do about it to make it go away. So I'm like, okay, you tell me you have to jab a needle into my shoulder. All right, I'm just going to lay here quietly and wince while you do it. Right. You tell me I have to go into this tight little tube where it's extremely loud and not move. I'm all right.
Guys,
I'm just going to do it.
Guys, we got her. She fell for it. She went into the tube.
But do you know what I mean? It's so easy when you're in pain. You're vulnerable. Mm. You're vulnerable to kind of manipulation or being misled by anyone who seems authoritative enough to be able to get you out of it.
Yeah. At the same time, too, I think, it took you a year and a half to get some sort of answer. And that was a year and a half of going, there's something wrong with my shoulder. And everybody, and I'm sure the people that you were seeing going like, well, you're not 15 anymore, Amanda. That kind of shit. And you're trying to say to them, no, I understand that.
Right.
But there's something, I know my body, there's something wrong. And they're like, well, why don't you just try stretching it a bit? It's like, no, okay. Listen, there is a problem, people know when there are things wrong, and having the people who are supposed to be guiding you through it just sort of dismissing your pain and suffering is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, and incredibly common. And I think...
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I think it happens to everyone at different times, but I think it especially happens to women.
In the remake of Rosemary's Baby, the real devil is the insurance company.
That's too close to real life, though. That's true, that's scary in a not fun way. But also, I think it's really telling that when it's just her in pain, and and she, she's scared for the pregnancy, but it's also early enough in the pregnancy that the baby is still kind of theoretical in her head.
Mm-hmm.
She's willing to sort of wait it out and kind of wait and see. And then when it goes away, she's fine, and she just goes along to get along. Then when things start to get weird and she's worried, and the baby is very close to being born, once she's worried about the baby's safety and health, then she's not willing to just get back in line.
Right.
And I think that's really telling, because I think right away she values her baby's life more than she values her own.
Yeah, she starts talking to her baby, little Andy or Jenny.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's clear that, like, she's willing to do things for that baby that she would never do just for herself.
Right.
Like, throughout the movie, she's not happy in her relationship with Guy. She's not happy that the Castevets seem to be kind of running their lives. She seems like she wants out in a lot of ways, but she's not willing to do it until she also thinks they're trying to take her baby.
Right. And then ultimately...
Then she's like, blow up her whole life. It's fine.
Right.
She just has to do it for her kid.
And then ultimately, the thing that gets her to come around is the motherly instinct of protecting her child, where it's Roman says to her, like, Minnie and Laura Louise are too old. The baby needs a mother. And that is the prevailing driving force for her, which is much stronger than anything else she's been brought up to believe, apparently.
Yeah, and I think that when you line that, I really like in this movie, if you line all the party scenes up together and see how Rosemary is in each of them. Like I was saying earlier, with the New Year's party, she's essentially just like, she might as well be furniture. They don't really give a shit. With the party with her friends, people are attentive to her, but they don't really know how to help her. They try to be there for her.
Right.
They want to sort of support her and celebrate her, but she's very much still in distress. She's still kind of hoping for someone else to come in and fix it.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, at the very end, at the Satanist party, when Rosemary finally kind of decides, she has that moment where she can't resist going up to the bassinet because Laura Louise is like shaking the damn thing back and forth, causing the demon baby to scream and cry. And Rosemary knows instinctively what Laura Louise is doing wrong. And no one else does in that party. No one else understands what to do. And finally, Rosemary's kind of the one who has the power, who has the ability, who has the knowledge. And everybody goes silent and like watches her walk up to the bassinet. And it's like they kind of are all seeing her in a way for the first time, I think. And she's stepping into a role of her own volition that might not be a good role.
Right.
but it's a choice she seems to be making. And it gives her a level of authority that they have to sort of acknowledge, I think, at that point. At least that's how I read that scene.
Yeah. I want to know what the casting process was for the background, for the extras in that final scene. Because that guy, that first
the guy with the camera. It's
nice to see that not even in Rosemary's Baby can you escape an Asian stereotype in the 60s. Surprised it wasn't Mickey Rooney playing him.
Jesus.
But the first guy who says "Hail Satan," he just slaps you across the face with that. Like, it comes out of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just like, "Hail Satan!" And it's so good. And I wonder if they audition just for that role, or did he know that this is my one line in this big budget production? I really need to lean into it here, or I've never. The way that he says it.
Roman Polanski being like, no, more emphasis. We want more emphasis on Satan.
I don't believe.
Really hit the T.
I don't believe that you believe. I need someone who believes in the Satan.
In the Satan.
But did they have to go through multiple people? Was that the first guy they saw? I don't know. I would love to know. But I every time I watch it, when they start chanting Hail Satan, it so much comes out of nowhere. And the fervor with which they say it is, I think the thing that makes it so surprising is that no one is doing anything particularly creepy or like malevolent. Right. They're just hanging out, having drinks, and then they just start chanting Hail Satan at the top of their lungs.
Right. They're still just kind of like fancy old people. Like there's no body parts strewn around the apartment. The walls aren't covered in blood.
Right. Yeah.
They're not naked or in robes or, whatever. They're just hanging out. Like it looks like the New Year's party all over again. They're all just kind of sitting around. And the thing that I love so much about that moment too is that you get the sense that, I mean, other than Minnie, I think Minnie's been herself this whole movie. I don't think Minnie can be anybody but herself. But you sort of get the feeling that for the first time they're all like, oh, thank God.
Right.
Like not, obviously not thank God. They'd say thank Satan. But they can kind of drop the act and they can all just be themselves. And it's like the most natural and relaxed. That trying not to spoil the surprise party energy has finally dissipated.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about Guy? I think Guy is a great character. I think apparently Castevet was a pain in the ass to work with, which I don't think that's the first time I've heard that. But he's a pretty highly regarded director in his own right, and I think there was some clashing of styles. I had read that Polanski had everything blocked out pretty tightly, and Castevet was much more of an improvisational kind of like let's just see what happens kind of actor and / director. But he's just the energy he brings to this character is just so perfect because he has to ride this line where I said last night, he's the perfect actor for this because he has resting shit face. In that, like, he always kind of looks like he's in a shitty mood, and you're like, I don't know if really you can trust this guy, but at the same time, he's not doing anything too outwardly menacing. And I referred to it as he's got Justin Long in Drag Me to Hell energy.
Yeah, and he does this great thing where he had that
gesture where he leans over.
The gesture with his arm.
Man, that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie because like Castevet doesn't even remember what the thing is. He's like, I saw you in this play and you made this gesture, and he's like, oh, when I did this, he's like, yeah, sure, why not? It was great.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. But he plays it so well where he reminds me of the guy who he reminds me of somebody who like all through high school and college and his like young 20s got away with stuff because he could be charming.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
But then now that he's an actual adult, it doesn't fly the same way, but he's used to people reacting to him like he's still charming. And so the Castevets get him real fast because I think they do that really well. They play into that little bit of his ego that they know they can stroke.
Yeah, he feels like the guy who was the quote unquote the best actor in high school, and then once he gets, or even college, and when he gets out into the real world, he doesn't hit it big right away, and so he's got this ego that's been stoked for however many years that isn't quite getting him where he wants to be.
Right.
And so he's got this sort of internalized stress and anger about it that is obviously strong enough that he's willing to throw his wife under the bus at the first mention of fame and fortune.
Yeah, and I think it's so great because this movie shows both why he was charming enough that Rosemary loves him the way she does. I think it does a good job of showing chemistry between the two of them and like how much fun he must be when he's in a good mood.
Sure, yeah.
So I like that it includes that because so often I think movies that do this sort of thing where it's tension or the ultimate betrayal comes from a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
you spend the whole movie being like, why does she like him? He's a piece of shit. He's smarmy asshole. Like, why would she ever want to be with this person? And in this, you're like, no, like, I can kind of see it. Like, they're cute together, and he makes her laugh and clearly puts her at ease in situations where she feels uncomfortable, and you can see why she'd be drawn to him. But then he also is so... Even when he's saying he's sorry, and even when he's apologizing to her, you can tell it's not about her, it's about him.
Oh, totally,
like,
yeah.
And I think it's hysterical that he wants to be this great actor, thinks he is this great actor, and yet he's the worst actor in the entire building.
Yes.
Like, all of the old people are much better actors than him, and he nearly gives himself away to Rosemary so many times. He can barely look at her. He can't stand to touch her. That's
my favorite bit that I don't know if I picked up on before, is when the baby starts kicking and she's like, here, feel it, and she pulls his hand in and he very quickly pulls his hand away because he obviously knows what's going on. It's so good.
Yeah, and he really, really is like, okay, that's great. And she's like, he's not gonna bite you
yet.
Yeah. But I think he does such a great job with the character, because he walks a line that I think it would be really difficult for other actors to walk, where he's a good enough liar in the movie to keep Rosemary in the dark without making her seem like an idiot. But he's also a bad enough actor that he adds to that little sliver of doubt that kind of keeps sneaking into her mind and cracking wider and wider open.
Yeah. And I think the way that they present him visually is really, really smart and really well done. There's a sense of blocking, especially towards the end of the movie, that really pushes him into... So once she comes to the party, right, he's always kind of big in the frame when they're together. You know, he's clearly the more dominant one. And then once she finds out what's going on and she gets to the party, there's a couple things that happen. When she first comes in, he does this amazing move where he sees her, reacts by starting to stand up, and then immediately sits back down because he knows there's nothing he can say. And from that point on, you see him start to push further and further into the background. And she starts becoming larger in the frame. So I think there's one shot even where it's like a close-up on her, and you can see that he's in a doorway, like in the far background. And then he eventually like slinks away behind the doorway. That might even be the last time you see him. I'm not 100% sure, but they are definitely
it might be.
They are definitely withering him away as you see her kind of ascend into her power and him really start to visually, and it's the illustration of him realizing how shitty he's been and what he's done.
Well, and I don't even think he's realized how shitty he's been. I think he's realizing that that this was never about him.
Right, yeah.
And I think he thought this was about him. I think he spends the whole movie thinking, I did this for my career so that I can be successful, and that will let me give Rosemary and our actual children later on down the line the lives I want to give them and the life I want to have. But ultimately, this is about me and kind of what I'm owed and what I deserve. That's why all of this is happening. And then I think in that ending sequence, that's him realizing that now that he doesn't have Rosemary, nobody in that room gives a shit about him.
Oh, yeah. There's a good chance that they kill him at some point, you know?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think if you were to make a sequel to this, and they actually did make a sequel, a TV movie that was...
oh, boy.
It's got a solid 3.3 on IMDb. It's called Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, boy.
And it's the one where the baby's voiced by Bruce Willis. No, that's a different one. But like, if you were to make a sequel, I could see it being like, guy is a washed out actor who's like a drunk now, who's yapping about the Antichrist and stuff. You know, like it has it has a lot of that feeling to it. Like he is going to be kicked to the road pretty quick.
Well, yeah. Why do they need him now?
Right.
You know,
yeah.
there's no reason for them to keep him around. He's served his purpose, and he's betrayed Rosemary so thoroughly that, you know, she's literally choosing to raise the baby of the devil, and she's spitting in his face.
Right.
Rather than, because his idea clearly of all of this was, she'll get pregnant, she'll have Satan's baby, and then we'll move on.
Yep.
I'll be a successful actor. We'll go to Beverly Hills. Everything's going to go back to the way it was.
Right, right.
And then we'll have our family, and she'll be my good little wife, and she'll raise our kids and keep our house nice.
Yeah.
And he kind of tries to say that to her at the end, where he's like, they told me you wouldn't be hurt, and look at you, you really weren't. And now we can have our own kids, and it's going to be great. And that's when she rejects him finally. And if hypothetically she does raise Adrian, Satan's child, if she has a bond with that baby, whatever it grows into, and these people worship that baby, it's sort of like she's now inseparable from that power.
Yeah, she's going to choose that baby over him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's so much stuff to talk about in this movie.
I know, we could go on for another hour, I feel
we
like.
didn't even really talk about the Castevets much. I did want to say the other thing that I really love about this, as far as the style and the construction of it, is they do such a good job of seeding supporters as conspirators and conspirators as supporters. Because a lot of the people who they set up the movie as doing things that seem a little bit out of the ordinary ultimately end up being the ones who weren't doing anything malevolent, and then the ones who are being overly nice and supportive are the ones who end up being the malevolent ones. Like the one bit that I love is after she goes to see Dr. Hill, she gets the phone call to say she's pregnant, and he's like, oh, by the way, not a big deal. If you could come in and draw some more blood, and her reaction is, well, I'm pregnant, right? Why do you need more blood? And he's like, yeah, no, it's fine. But we need some more blood. It's just like, it's just weird enough that's, that plus like when they're coming into the hotel, the people who are working on the hotel are kind of eyeing her up, a similar way as they do in Repulsion when she's walking through town. And, it's so sad because when she finally breaks away and she finally figures it out, she goes to the one person who isn't in on it, and he ends up being the one who turns her in, who drops a dime on her. And it's just so heartbreaking because Dr. Hill is on the up and up, but he's reacting to this as though she's completely insane. And so obviously he calls her husband, but it's so sad.
Well, the thing that I love about that actually is that he clearly thinks she's kind of exaggerating or overblowing things, but until she mentions Dr. Saperstein's name, up to that point, he's kind of willing to believe her.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
He says, like, she's like, I must sound crazy. I know this all sounds ridiculous, but I swear these people are real. And he's like, well, it does sound kind of crazy, but there are crazy people in this city who are willing to do crazy things.
Right.
And so he's sort of like, let's get you into the hospital safely. Let's handle this. Wait a minute. Who is the doctor you've been seeing so far? And then when he hears Saperstein's name, it's somebody who's so preeminent in his field that even he can't imagine that any of this is true. And I think that feeds back into what we were talking about earlier with why Rosemary is so willing to go along with the program for so long. And it's because, this doctor is the best doctor in New York City. He's influential. He's essentially famous in his field. And so the idea that he would be wrong or mistreating her is, in this time period, like patently absurd.
Yeah.
So I think that makes it even more heartbreaking, is because not only did Rosemary pick the one correct person she could have that is not involved in this conspiracy, she almost got him to believe her. And it's only in that last second that she says just slightly the wrong thing, and that's what dooms her.
Yeah. The building that they used for the apartment is the Dakota building, which has quite a history. The interiors were shot at Paramount Studios, but the exteriors were all shot in New York. Do you remember your first night in your condo? Was it similar to where it's just like food on the floor?
Excuse me. It was definitely similar. I think we had some furniture from our first apartment. But it was like a couch, a coffee table, a mattress on the floor kind of deal. Yeah. So similar enough.
Yeah, ours was almost identical to this because we had no furniture. I believe we were also eating Chinese food. The only thing we had to sleep on was a air mattress that we borrowed, and we didn't have any curtains on the windows or anything, and we were just we went to bed, and our house is right on the corner of an intersection, and I didn't realize this until we shut all the lights off and decided to go to sleep, but without curtains on the windows, every time the lights changed, the entire room would either be blasted with green light or blasted with red light. And
very soothing.
Yeah. And it was like May. It was like late May, so we had the windows open, and there's no furniture, so that everything's echoing. We have this air mattress that, unbeknownst to us, had a hole in it, like a small hole.
Oh, my God.
And so what ended up happening was, we both go to bed, and I obviously weigh more than my girlfriend does, and so she slept like a baby, whereas I was weighed just enough to prop her up, so she had a lovely sleeping experience, but I was compressing the mattress just enough so that the middle of my lower back was ever so gently touching the hardwood floor.
Oh.
It was some sort of like torture, like
you're
water torture.
You're sleeping in like a slight V position.
Yes, ever so slightly touching, like getting constantly dripped water on your head, right?
Yeah.
And I would say yes, I was sleeping that way, but I was not sleeping because I was lying there with the floor pressing into my back, just enough to drive me insane, staring at the ceiling as it just changed from bright green to bright red all night. And then right when I thought I was about to get to sleep, the buses started.
Oh,
and
no.
So it was well, the next day she's like, man, that was great. I slept so well. How about you? And I was like, did we keep the receipt on this house? Can we take it back?
So your first night in your condo was more like what Alex in A Clockwork Orange goes through?
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Yeah, maybe a little less Rosemary's Baby and a little more of that.
Yeah, so.
I also just want to, I know we're running out of time, but
you get all the time in the world.
I know.
It's the people who are listening that are running out of patience, I think, is probably.
I know. But I just briefly, I also love the ways in which other movies feed into this one. Mm-hmm. And you can pick out inspirations and little kind of references to other things, like having the actor from is it The Haunting of Hill House?
Oh, House on Haunted Hill, yeah.
House on Haunted Hill. Having him be the landlord, having Rosemary, when she feels the baby kick, start yelling, "It's alive."
Oh, right. I missed that, yeah.
It's so good. Like, just it weaves those little things in there in a way where it's not hokey and overdone, but it's there if you want to pick up on it. I really like that.
Yeah, and there's a funny story about about that, where William Castle, who was the producer of, he was kind of like the horror schlockmeister of the 50s. He did House on Haunted Hill. He did The Tingler. He did 13 Ghosts. Usually his movies came along with some sort of gimmick. Like The Tingler, they installed buzzers into all the seats so it would zap you in the butt. And at the point in the movie where the Tingler supposedly escapes into the theater. He bought the rights to the book, which the writer was not thrilled about, as he was on an interview with like a talk show with Stephen King and a couple other writers, and he was and they were like, "What did you think when William Castle bought your book?" And he said, "I am not thrilled," because he was thinking House on Haunted Hill and blah 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 blah. And I guess William Castle brought the book to Robert Evans at Paramount, and Evans loved it, but he said, "We don't want you to direct it. We're going to get Roman Polanski." And Castle was heartbroken because he really wanted to direct it. He wanted this to be his stepping stone into more legitimate movies.
Aw.
Yeah. And but he stayed on as a producer, and the writer was much happier when they said Polanski was going to do it. But William Castle's actually in the movie, in the scene where Rosemary's in the phone booth doing fantastic telephone improv. The guy who walks in front and like stands with his back to the telephone booth, that's William Castle.
Oh, that's fun.
Which, and I have to think that this is on purpose. You're talking about movies feeding into other movies. In The Howling, which was directed by Joe Dante, who was a student of the Roger Corman filmmaking company. At the beginning of the movie, when Dee Wallace is in a phone booth, person waiting outside the phone booth to use a phone booth after her is Roger Corman. So I have to assume that is a direct reference to Rosemary's Baby in that specific. That's the kind of thing that Dante would definitely know that was William Castle. You know, like that's the kind of cameo callback that I could see him doing.
Yeah, and I think if we were to get into the lineage of the movies that came after Rosemary's Baby, that owe a lot to it, it would be a very, very, very long list.
Absolutely. This is it's one of those films where there's speculation. It's funny how this happened a lot in the late 60s, early 70s, particularly with, I guess it makes sense, particularly with the movies that were devil-centric. But this is one of those movies where people think is cursed because of the things that happened after it. This is obviously a big one, considering that Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, was murdered by the Manson family very soon after this.
Yeah.
But there's a couple other weird things. The composer, Christopher Komeda, died mysteriously after a 3-month coma, which is exactly how Hutch dies in the movie.
Wow.
And the woman that Rosemary meets in the basement, this is a weird kind of story, but she's billed as Angela Dorian. And in the movie, Rosemary says to her, "You look like Victoria Vetri, the actress." Victoria Vetri is that actress's real name.
Oh.
I don't know why she's billed as Angela Dorian.
Huh.
But she was apparently good friends with Sharon Tate. And she was supposedly supposed to be at the house the night that the Manson family showed up, but she stayed home for some reason. I don't know. I'm not sure why, but nothing suspicious, but she just decided not to go.
Yeah. But, she just wasn't feeling like it.
Yeah, it's one of those weird little bits of synchronicity and stuff like that.
Wow.
And of course,
did you hear?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, did you hear the rumor of who's in the Satan costume?
Oh, yeah, it was a rumor that it's Anton LaVey.
Yeah, it wasn't.
No, that seems to not be true, but that is.
No, it's not. But it's a fun rumor that went around for a while.
Yeah.
That Anton LaVey was the one dressed up as Satan, and that he took the costume with him after the movie.
Man, talk about being in the right place at the right time for that guy. That guy's so lame, but he was at the right point in the zeitgeist where people were like into the occult and shit, and he just rode that stuff to the bank.
Yep.
And of course, the other big one regarding things in this movie is the Dakota Building, which is where John Lennon lived when he was shot and killed by Mark David Chapman. I actually have a weird story about the Dakota Building myself. I went to school in New York, and I forget where I was. I was in Manhattan for some reason. And I was walking with my friend down a street, and we walked by the front of a building, and there was just a very creepy, morose kind of vibe came over me as I looked over and saw this building with this big archway, stone archway, and these kind of low light candle lanterns in the front of it. I'm like, oh, that's a really creepy front of that building. And then once we got to the end of the street, I realized where we were, and I said, oh my God, that was the Dakota building. That was where John Lennon got shot. Like, we walked right by it. And that was, I don't know, it was just the perfect time of night to make it seem extra creepy, and the location being what it was, gave me a bit of a chill, but
spooky.
Yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about before I read these reviews?
I feel like there's so much
that
we could keep going, but we should probably start towards an end at this point. So please read the review.
Well, this is from May 11th, 2022, and it says, "What a bore. What? It can't be. Nope, this movie actually sucks. I've heard so many good things about this movie, and after watching it, I can say it's old. This isn't a timeless movie and feels like a late 60s, early 70s movie in a bad way. If you like slow burn movies, this is one of them, but for me, no thanks. And the acting back then is weird too. Mia Farrow talks like she's British for some reason, even though it takes place in the US, and watching these old movies, I think it's just how people talked at that time. Not a fan. In the end, I'm not a fan. The idea that her husband joined a cult, she should have went in a taxi to her parents or something, but she was caught so easily. She could have got away. I bet it was easier back then compared to now, cell phones. Anyway, I can't believe this movie sucks. Very disappointing."
Wow.
Yeah. And
what a cogent analysis.
The second one from April 9th, 2022. "Talk about a boring movie. They rate this movie in the top 10 scariest of all movies of all time. Why? It's not scary at all. I get it. Having the devil's baby is scary. Yeah, if it were a real life thing. But the fact it was a movie is kind of lame."
But wait. By that logic, no movie could ever be scary unless it's literally a documentary.
That's my favorite part about it. It's like, well, yes, the concept of having Satan's child is terrifying if it were to really happen. But if it's just a movie, so it's stupid. I watched it numerous times. So everyone knew the woman was having Satan's baby but her. That's fine. It doesn't make the movie scary, though. The actress that played the woman having Satan's baby was a very good actress, but I honestly just thought the movie was lame.
I mean, he might as well have just called her the female.
Right. So, yeah. It's so strange because I feel like that this... I don't know if it's... I don't want to make gross assumptions about people, but this last person said they watched it numerous times. I don't know. Do you think that this movie holds up as well as I think it does?
I think if you were like a 13-year-old boy and you watched this, you'd come away being like, that's not scary.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, I really do think it's the kind of thing that if you're younger and you're sort of going into it expecting it to be, I don't know, like a gore fest or something scary in the way that like The Descent is scary, then yeah, I can just see it not hitting for specific demographics. But I feel like if you are willing to put yourself in Rosemary's shoes even a little bit and kind of do what you should do with most movies, which is suspend your disbelief, then you can pretty quickly start to see why it's so disturbing.
Yeah. It brings up an interesting question about scary movies too, right? Because it's like... It's a very subjective thing, and I know people who this kind of stuff just doesn't work on them, like demons and Satan stuff. I had a friend in college who was like, I think we were talking about The Exorcist or something, and she was like, "Oh, that movie was stupid. I didn't find that scary. I don't find religious stuff scary." And then I said, "Well, what do you find scary?" She said, "Scream. That's the scariest movie I've ever seen because it's." Much more based in something that could theoretically, quote unquote, happen. It's more about a real person doing real crime and actively killing people, and no supernatural. There's no reason why something like that couldn't happen in real life. And so I wonder if that's part of it.
You don't need to suspend your disbelief quite so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see that. I do think it's an interesting question, because it is like comedy. It's very personal to you and your experience and sort of how you see the world.
Right, yeah.
What you might find scary and disturbing and what doesn't really hit for you.
Yeah. Yeah, like if the people who wrote these reviews said their favorite movie was like The Conjuring, then I would give them a little bit of a stink eye, though, if that's where we're going. But again, as we've talked about, there's so much other stuff excuse me, in here that is just so well done and is so disturbing in a way that isn't the high concept. And I think that's something some people have difficulty with too, is just kind of stopping at the high concept. As you know, as that one person said, the idea that she's pregnant with the devil's baby, oh, that's stupid. It's like, okay, well, all right, well then obviously we're not going to get you here if that's where you're stopping, and you're not appreciating, or you're not willing to look at everything else that's been done filmmaking wise and tension wise and stuff in this movie.
Right. And it's really too bad for people who are closed off in that way, especially to a movie like this that has such a clear lineage down through modern horror movies and continues to sort of inspire different things and be referenced by different things. If you're not willing to at least appreciate the work and the detail that's gone into this movie and the ways in which it spurred other things, you're really like cutting yourself off from a whole section of the genre, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's tough though too, because like we're getting into the period of time where this movie is almost 60 years old, like 55 years old or something like that. Yeah. And that's like, imagine most people weren't watching movies from 55 years ago when we were in high school, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how this stuff holds up as we go forward, but I think this is number 27 on our list. How do you feel about that placement? Because obviously we're keeping it on the list.
Oh, right. That placement actually makes me mad. I feel like this one should be top 10.
I would agree. I think 27 is criminally low for this.
Yeah, because I skimmed the list earlier this afternoon to look at what was between it and number 1. And while there were some pretty good ones in there, there were some where I was like, look, don't get me wrong, A Quiet Place is great.
Exactly. Perfect one that I would definitely flop.
Yeah. I really actually enjoy that movie. I think it has a lot to recommend itself. We've talked about it before. Mm-hmm. But if you want to compare it to the impact that it has had on all of horror, to a movie like Rosemary's Baby, it's just like, you're not there. Like, please put this one at number 5 or whatever A Quiet Place is at, and put A Quiet Place at 27, which is a very respectable spot.
Right. Like, I really enjoyed The Invisible Man from 2020. I don't think it's the number 9th scariest movie ever made, or best scary movie, especially not compared to Rosemary's Baby. So,
right. I mean, I guess at least it's not as bad as where they put The Shining. So
true. Yes. You know that what's interesting. I was going to bring that up. I forgot to. Kubrick loved this movie, and I feel like you can see a lot of this in The Shining. Maybe not in obvious ways, but I think he takes a lot of this background uneasiness stuff from this, like the way that the layout of the Overlook doesn't make any sense, or the way that props just move between takes, you know, or the thing that I sent you the other day about, for some reason, Jack Torrance keeps looking into camera throughout the movie, even if like it happens enough times where it feels like it must be intentional, and it's just one of those things that is just unnerving enough that it's probably more subconscious than anything else, but it's going to keep you kind of like off kilter a little bit. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that. Yeah. Speaking of the greatest horror movies of all time in their placement, I have hit the randomizer button, beep boop boop beep boop boop beep boop. And we have landed on number 5. We're continuing with our heavy hitters. We're going to be watching Alien.
Oh shit.
Yeah, which I'm kind of shocked. Part of me was like, did we already do that? I remember Wes and I had talked about Alien multiple years ago, but I don't know if I've watched it since then, so I'm looking forward to diving into that one.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
It is one of my personal top 10. So I've seen it a lot. I'm very stoked to talk about it.
Excellent. Well, if you'd like to help support the show, head over to patreon.com/thepenskyfile and sign up for our Patreon. You can get an extra podcast every month from us where Amanda and I are covering Video Nasties films this year. And last year we did the second string of Stephen King. And the year before that, we did the entire Friday the 13th series. So if that interests you, head on over there. Check it out. It's a lot of fun.
Come listen to me slowly go insane while we cover all the Jason movies.
Yes. And listen to me try to figure out what it is about 50s greaser car culture that Stephen King finds so terrifying.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.